Dr. Kevin Jefferson here, back with the Region 2 National Medical Association Annual Convention here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm here with Dr. Kelly Posner, who just gave a fantastic, very riveting presentation on suicide prevention. Dr. Posner, would you tell us about yourself and a little wrap-up of what you just gave us here today?
Yeah, so the good news that I shared today is that as much as suicide is one of our greatest public health crises, right? It takes more firemen than fire, more lives than car accidents. It's actually our one preventable cause of death. And what's the formula for that, right? We have to find the people suffering in silence. What does that mean? 50% of suicides see their primary care doctor the month before they die.
Wow.
We need to treat this like blood pressure or vision testing. And when you treat it normally like a vital sign, it actually destigmatizes. It makes people more comfortable. And you know what? When people are suffering, they actually want to be asked and they want help. One of the other very important things that I shared today is that we have to have that concept, making it routine like a vital sign, well beyond the doctor's office into the community. You know why? Many people never get to the doctor. So what we know, and this is really important, 75% of people in the United States who end their lives do it in their homes. 95% of 5 to 11-year-old black kids who take their lives do it at home. So I got to give the lead presentation to the Senate after Parkland, and I said to these senators, you have policy for the doctor and the policeman, but how do we get it in every parent, every home? And that kind of public health and campaign that we need to have is a vital way to help us save lives. And we know, so I'm the lead scientist of this simple set of questions called the Columbia Protocol.
The one that's on all of our EMRs.
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic.
It's everywhere across the continuum of care. It's a very potent, simple thing. And why has it been kind of chosen as the global method of detection most often? Because you know what? It's the first time we have science-based thresholds for imminent risk. We didn't know who to worry about before. Now we do. And only 1% of people have that high-risk answer where you need to go to a next step. And you know why that's really important? Because in the past, when we didn't know who to worry about, that policeman had to take everybody to the hospital. And you know what happens then? It shuts those people down who don't need it when they actually do need it, right? So the important impact on care delivery is just critical. So we know we need to get it in all hands, and we know that, again, when people are suffering or feeling suicidal, they don't often have the will to come to you. That's why we need to be there to ask. The other reason, one of the other things that makes this unique is that it's the first time we're asking about all suicidal behaviors. What does that mean? It means if you were lucky in the past, you'd get asked about a suicide attempt, and then you missed the person that bought the gun, or wrote the suicide note, or collected the pills, things we cannot afford to miss. And guess what our science shows us? That's the majority of what people are doing, these other things we were never asking about before. An interrupted attempt, that's someone like the policeman pulls you off the ledge. That was 4 times as predictive as a suicide attempt. Simple potency. And one of the other things that's really important is that everybody can and needs to be part of the solution and is empowered to do it. Everybody. This huge system said, we gave it to the janitors. And this clinician from the VA said, exactly right. I'll never forget that case where the only person that vet spoke to was the janitor. So whether you're in a school or a front desk worker or a bus driver, everybody is empowered to be part of the solution.
What do we as healthcare providers, I'm a podiatrist, but I see people who or on medications for depression and what have you. What should we be asking or looking for other than the Columbia Protocol?
Absolutely. So the second piece of the solution, right, to preventing suicide is depression is treatable, suicide is preventable. Its biggest cause is this genetic treatable medical illness called depression. But you don't think of depression like you think of cancer, right? You would never hear the word choice when it comes to cancer. And that misunderstanding literally can be lethal. It leads up to 75% of people to not get these simple life-saving medicines. What we do know is that antidepressants save lives, and not treating depression is what kills people. So messaging that this is a medical illness like anything else. And if you had asthma, you'd have an inhaler. And if you had an infection, you'd have an antibiotic, right?
Right.
And so, also the other thing is, what we need to have a culture shift that has people talking about it being a sign of strength to ask for help. You know, what were those barriers? Are those barriers to treatment and to treatment and to identification? Is that, you know, this isn't a real illness. I'm weak if I ask for help, and like I said, those can literally be lethal. And when we start to let people know that seeking help is a sign of strength, you know, manning up is seeking treatment. You know, those are the things. You know, men die by suicide more than women, and now unfortunately, the recent increase we see in suicide again after we've had our first reductions is youth, 15 to 24, and we have a big problem in men and boys, right? Because they have this particular barrier to help seeking. So when we start to really change the culture and message, you know, we go a long way.
Yeah. There's been this increase in the past few years, and even pre-pandemic, of the increase in suicide and suicide attempts in young black males. As that's something that's wasn't talked about when I was a kid, right? But now we're seeing some significant
issues. And it's the first
issues.
time we're seeing the discrepancy. In whites, it's gone down, okay, and we're seeing in blacks and young blacks in particular, and males, we're seeing this increase. And yes, we can talk about, causality all day long, structural racism, whatever it may be, those barriers to help seeking. But the point is, we have to think about the solutions, right? And when you start to treat this like a vital sign, like we were talking about, it breaks down those barriers of stigma, And the other thing is, remember how I said that these misunderstandings can be lethal?
Right.
You know that runaway hit on Netflix called 13 Reasons? What does that say? It says the opposite. It says this is a rational choice, not a brain-based illness. Guess what happened the month after the premiere? Suicide spiked.
Tell us how the pandemic, we see a lot, we hear a lot about how the pandemic has affected all of us, but particularly our school-age youth.
Yes, well, it caused isolation, it impacted normal socialization, there's so many ways. And we know that in girls 12 to 17, going to an ER in the last few years during the pandemic for a mental health reason has gone up 50%. I'm a glass half full person. I think in some ways that might be a good thing because they're seeking help, right? And in some ways, mental health issues have become normalized, and that takes some of the stigma away. What we do know, which I guess is somewhat of the good news, is during 2019 and 20, we had our first reductions in the suicide rate after 20 years of increases. But again, only among white Americans, right? So the point is, the pandemic has done so much, to impact kids' lives in so many ways. And what we need to do to protect against those sequelae is, again, monitor for depression, monitor for suicide, so we can make sure to much more upstream and much more quickly get those kids the help that they need.
Dr. Bus, thank you very much for coming to Philadelphia, joining us here at Region 2. If you would like some more information about Dr. Posner, her contact information will be in the description of this video. Continue to stay tuned to the podcast as we have bring a lot of good stuff to you from this weekend here in Philly. Talk to you later.